When David Lynch set out to make Dune, everyone was convinced he would fail. The book was for science fiction nerds. The world was too complex to envision on the big screen, but despite the movie being criticized in the past, I always liked it. I was looking forward to Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 1, and I was happy with it as well. I waited patiently for the second part. I could have waited more, just as long as I would get an equal or better film to conclude the adaptation of the first book of Frank Herbert's Dune. I'm Mephisto, like, share, and subscribe because this is my review of the movie Dune Part 2. What happens when you're excited for a movie for a couple of years, wanting it to succeed and wanting it to entertain you, and then it falls flat on its ass? There have been many cases in the past of this exact thing throughout Hollywood's history. Dune Part 1 came out in a difficult time. It was 2021, people were still afraid to go out and socialize in the movie theater, and the movie was actually released simultaneously on HBO's streaming service. It was a bit different from Lynch's take on the book, however, I did like it. I might even say I loved it. Now comes Dune Part 2. And what can I say about this movie? In one sentence, it was awful. But let me elaborate for a few minutes about why it is. This is a spoiler-free review, but I will touch upon basic plot points. The movie begins with a monologue by Princess Irulan, the daughter of the Emperor. She recounts the deeds of the first film and adds a few more details that were hidden behind the scenes. From there, the movie picks up exactly where Part 1 left off. The Fremen are taking Jameis's body back to the Stitch after the duel with Paul. Paul and his mother accompany them, and along the way, they encounter a lot of whispering about them and how they are foreigners and they need to go away and die in the desert. Paul wants to join the Fremen and learn their ways in order to revenge his father's death and his house's downfall. On the one hand, he wants to be accepted, and on the other hand, he refuses to be labeled as the Messiah or a prophet. As he slowly gains the trust of the Fremen, he also gains the love of Chani, and it all leads to an inevitable clash with House Harkonnen, the Baron, and his psychotic protege, Fade Routha. Visually, Denis is a stunning director. The sweeping long shots, the beautification of the environments like the deserts are fantastic. But visually, this part suffers a weird duality. Besides the wonderful lit shots, even in low light, you can find certain scenes that are completely dark. I couldn't see anything on screen besides moving shadows. Some of the fight scenes were tremendously choreographed and well edited, and some of the fight scenes had way too many cuts, shaky cams, or worse, awfully lit shots, and I just couldn't see anything. One of my gripes about Dune, and this goes up to Part 1, is the miscasting of Paul Atreides. I don't think Timothée Chalamet is a good Paul. In this movie, it was even more apparent. Chalamet does not have the gravitas needed for Paul, especially not in the later parts of the movie, where he finally embraces who he really is. Don't get me wrong, I'm not looking for a Kyle MacLachlan carbon copy or somebody that looks like him or acts like him, but Chalamet is just not fit for this role. When it goes to the actual script, I despise modern writing. I think that anyone who writes for modern audiences does a disservice to the story and the characters, especially when adapting an established book or lore. To add to that, I'm a bit hypersensitive when it comes to hidden political agenda and messaging. I simply hate it, and I wish it would go away. Dune the book has an underlying messaging written within the story itself. Those I don't mind. I'm aware of them. They are part of the story that revolves in a political intrigue of the entire empire. But blatant modern messaging woven into the story like a patchwork becomes too obvious and simply obnoxious. It happened only a couple of times in the movie, and yet it was so obvious. Even my wife was groaning in her seat, and I could hear someone above me in the theater saying, "Whoa, this is just like that Endgame scene all over again." That's spot on. Putting all that aside, the movie was generally just boring. I nodded off several times during the movie. There were far too many filler shots, people looking at each other, and shots that are plain old extending of the scene that could have been shortened. In the first 30 minutes, I was sitting there and thinking, there's nothing happening. I hope they start training this boy soon because I know how much story there is to tell, and still, nothing happened yet. Denis Villeneuve does a much better job in adapting the source material than Lynch did, but even he has his moments where he goes a little bit off the rails, which is understandable. It wasn't really there in part 1, but it was definitely there in part 2. For example, just the introduction of Fade Rautha took way too much time. And if you managed to watch one of the trailers for the movie, you got most of the best bits of that particular scene. But as the movie progressed slowly, I was just, bring on the worms and let them eat everything on the screen. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out of the theater and I was shocked and surprised. I really wanted this movie to be good, and I was completely disappointed. This was bad, long, and a boring movie. I read Dune, and Dune Messiah, and The Children of Dune. All these are hard sci-fi to read. I admit it, but I was willing to put all these books aside and just enjoy the movie. I was expecting a good story, and what I got was a few good scenes followed by a few spectacularly beautiful scenes and a whole lot of boring, overlong, disappointing mess. If I haven't read the books, I would be lost, especially with the very end of the movie. I won't spoil it, but I can say that it made no sense why it ended in that particular way. In Dune Part 1, it left you with a taste for wanting more. In Dune Part 2, it drained all my excitement for the upcoming Dune Messiah. It's actually a good thing that I have to wait a couple of years until it comes out, if it ever comes out. As for my recommendations, if you really want to finish up the story, just wait until this movie comes out on a streaming service. It's just not worth the price of admission. I thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this review, smash that like button to help me out and beat that algorithm. Check out other reviews that I've done in the past, or check out our live Saturday show where we cover all sorts of amazing films. And remember, hope is a good thing, maybe even the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. I'll see you on the next video.